Okay. Uh, I'd like to talk to you today about Daniel chapter 9. And the reason for my interest in Daniel chapter 9 is it basically is because I once was a Christian. I am not a Christian now. And I'm a humble man. I do believe in the God of the Old Testament. But I've found reason to believe that Christianity is not the right way. But I stay in tune with Christianity. I listen to Christian preachers and so forth. And then the other day when I was listening to one of the Christian radio preachers, he just kind of glossed over, made a quick statement that there was a prophecy in the Old Testament that predicted the exact time of the coming of the Messiah, of Jesus. And I like to be a very thoughtful person, and if there is something that gives some credibility to Christianity, such as this exact timing of the coming of the Messiah, I would like to know about it. I like to consider it, because I don't want to make a mistake. So I've studied the prophecy a little bit, and just enough to see that, man, it can get pretty convoluted. I'm telling you, the pencil whipping that has to go on to make this fit the time of Jesus is kind of incredible. There's lots of theories about it, and people claiming that other people don't know what they're talking about, and this is what it is, and it's pointing to this event or that event in Jesus' life. And so one thing to kind of get in perspective is, what was the time frame of Daniel chapter 9? Daniel was, in this chapter 9 here, he was in captivity in Babylon, the Babylonian captivity, And I don't know what year it was, and I'm not even going to try to say. It was sometime back in like the 5th century, something like that. And in the opening part of Daniel chapter 9, I'm just going to run through the chapter real quick, and please stay with me, because this is real basic, and I think that there is some point to be made here, because again, I'm coming from Christianity. When somebody says something significant, like there's a prophecy that predicts the exact timing of the Messiah, I think, whoa, maybe there is some credibility to this. So we need to look, and whenever you hear preachers refer to this from time to time, you need to understand it. But if you really try to understand it, it'll kind of just blow you away. So I'm not going to go so much into the Christian interpretation of it as I am going to just show how some of the things that just naturally read from the text don't agree with the Christian interpretation. And then it is real simple. You don't have to be a scholar or anything to figure this out. I'm not a scholar. I just kind of like to try to understand things. So, okay, quick review of Daniel chapter 9. In the opening of Daniel chapter 9, he is reviewing Jeremiah's work, and he sees the part where Jeremiah he prophesies a 70-year captivity. So Daniel's going, wow, I'm going to be here for 70 years. I don't know if he'd been there for 30 years or 40 at the time of his reading this, but he said it's going to be a total of 70 years. And he spends a great part of the chapter after that kind of lamenting, confessing the sins of the people. And down towards the end of the chapter, he has it says a man, Gabriel, flies to him. It kind of sounds like an angel. And he tells Daniel a prophecy. Okay, and this is the prophecy that is referred to, that people say that predicts the exact timing of the coming of the Messiah, of Jesus. Okay, and he said 70 weeks are determined. So 70 weeks. This is a prophecy. Remember, we're back like 500 years before the time of Jesus here. And it says 70 weeks are determined. So, okay, how do you get 70 weeks to the time of Jesus? Well, just hold on just a minute. We'll talk about that in a minute, all right? So, he says 70 weeks, and the start of the 70-week period is going to be going forth of the decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem. Now, there's an important point to be made here. In prophecy, you have to have time or something relevant that would make it meaningful. Like if I said this house is going to fall down sometime, well, that ain't much of a prophecy, because if you let time run on out there, it probably will fall down. If I said my truck's going to break down, well, it probably eventually will. But if I said my truck is going to break down at 3 o'clock next Tuesday, that would be a prophecy. And so in here they say there's 70 weeks. It's been decreed, okay, and the 70-week period is going to start with. It's going to coincide with the decree to go and restore and rebuild Jerusalem. Okay? Now, then it says there will be 7 weeks from this decree will pass until the coming of the anointed prince, the Messiah. Now, this is where they go, oh, Jesus. All right, so there'll be 7 weeks till the coming of the anointed prince, the Messiah, and then there'll be another 62 weeks after that will go on to do the rebuilding the streets and the wall or moat or trench or whatever. And then it says after this 62-week period that this anointed Messiah would be cut off and he would have nothing. And then, we're almost at the end of the chapter, almost at the end of this prophecy. It says that this anointed Messiah that's been cut off and have nothing, he'll go and he'll make a strong covenant with many for 1 week. And then in the middle of the week or the latter part of the week or something, that he would bring an end to sacrifice and offering. Now, the language after that gets really strange at the end because it just sounds bad. It's just desolation. The word desolation comes up more than once until the decreed end comes. And so we have, in quick review, we have 70 weeks, Gabriel says. Then he says, we'll break the 70 weeks down into 7 weeks, 62 weeks, and then 1 week. And that adds up to 70, okay? Now, now that we reviewed that, okay, let's talk about the Christian interpretation of it. Now, they need about 490 years. And what we have here is 70 weeks. And so the fundamental thing that the Christian interpretations do, and they just assume this up front, and they say, okay, well, we're going to assume this, and we're just going to go from there. Then we'll try to pencil whip this and make this fit the time of Jesus. Now, I shouldn't say pencil whip. That kind of sounds a bit derogatory. But we'll work with that number and see if we can make this fit some event of Jesus' life, whether it be his birth, his death, his baptism, his triumphal entry, something. We'll try to make that fit. Okay? And we've got a lot of dates from, way back when, Artaxerxes and Cyrus and all. So, and there's some decrees to restore the temple and the city and things like that. So there's some things that they can work with. All right? And it gets pretty close, but, I don't even want to get into all that math because it just kind of gets a little bit mind-boggling. And like Martin Luther, he went through all this. He's a high-powered, leader of the Protestant Christian movement. He said, you know what? It's just close, okay? We don't quite get there, but it's close. And I don't know what he meant by close, but he just kind of threw his hands up and said, it's close enough. That prophecy, and they don't exactly match, but whatever. And so we can spend a lot of time trying to, claim it's this and claim it's that, and many, many people have, but that's not the point. The point is that the prophecy is a 70-week prophecy. You read any translation you want to. If you look real hard, you might find some people who take the liberty of saving 77s, and that's actually the path where they're going to turn this 70 weeks into 490 years. Now, so basically what they do is they say, I've got to change the weeks into 7-year periods. All right, and so 70 is the multiplier, and then where it says weeks, that is 7-year period. So 70 times 7-year periods is 490 years. Boom, we're up there close to the time of Jesus, from the time of these decrees to restore and build Jerusalem. All right, now, so that's kind of how they get there. Now, is that valid? No. I mean, right there, I just say absolutely not. That's not valid whatsoever. However, let's just kind of think through this anyway and see what it is, how this works with the text. Now, stay with me. We're about 2/3 of the way there. All right. So whenever I said it, we have 7 weeks until the Messiah comes, and then we have 62 weeks to build the city. And at that point, when the city is built after 62 weeks, this Messiah is cut off and he'll have nothing, and he'll make a strong covenant with many for a week. We go through that like this, and it kind of sequentially, at least if you were writing a script, I mean, it would work. However, now let's stop and let's go to the Christian interpretation is. The Christian interpretation is you take the 7 and the 62 and you put those together, and you say the Messiah comes after 69 weeks instead of after 7 weeks. Now, so we have the time, the 7 and the 62, and the 62 is specified as the time that it takes to rebuild the city. And then in the next verse it says, after the 62 weeks, the anointed prince will be cut off. So if you take the 7 and the 62 together, you get 69 weeks to the coming of the Messiah. That's where the 483 years comes from that people like to use. So if you take 7 and 62, you have him coming there, and then it says in the next verse, it says that after the 62 weeks, he'll be cut off. But wait, it took 69 for him to get there, but he's being cut off after 62 now. That doesn't make any sense. So the sequence it's fouled up, it doesn't work. And just real quick, at the ending of it, I mean, it just all falls apart. I mean, it sounds like that this same anointed prince that came after 7, got deposed after 62, made a strong covenant with many for 1 week, and put an end to sacrifices and offerings. It sounds like things just went to pot after that, and all kind of desolations and destructions happened because of this man. He sounds like a bad guy. I don't want to say he's a bad guy. I don't know who he is. I don't know what the deal is, but it sounds like he's a bad guy as he's depicted here. So, and the last point to be made is this, and that is, why are we talking about this anyway? Well, the reason is because Christianity, they want to have credibility. And they read this verse and they find just an inkling. It talks about a Messiah. Yeah, it does. It talks about an anointed one, but there were many anointed people. The rulers were typically anointed kings. And so, it just has this little piece in there that sounds kind of good, and then they started doing some pencil whipping and manipulation and ignoring, and it don't work, So, okay, in the end, ultimately, I would say that, me, for various and many sundry reasons, I've decided that Christianity is not the true religion, and that I should follow another way. Or, I don't necessarily join myself to anyone, don't feel the need to, but I can see that Christianity is not right, and this passage doesn't give any credibility to Christianity at all. It shows that there's been an attempt made to, support themselves, but it ain't there. It just plumb ain't there. It's not. You can't change weeks into 7-year periods. You can't have 7 and 62 for the coming of the Messiah, then the 62 having him cut off 7 weeks before he came. The ending is all bad, so it don't sound like this is necessarily a good guy. So the motivations are all wrong. So I would just invite you to read the text and, go through and study people's interpretations and see all the manipulation they go through. I mean, I've seen some crazy stuff about, the moon used to be closer to the earth or something before the flood, and years were longer then, and so we can subtract this from that, and it gets kind of silly. So this is a prophecy that had relevance to the time of Daniel, and we don't know exactly what it has to do with. I mean, there was the city was, or the wall was rebuilt in a troublous time, just like it says in verse 25, I think it is, and so that it does seem to be relevant to that week's units time frame. So I'm not led closer to Christianity by it. It's kind of a step away because of the misguided efforts to make something say something that it don't say. So give it a review and keep thinking.